What's going on? Welcome into the Matt Bernier Show, part of the In the Money Media Network. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Today is October the 26th, 2020. This is episode 38 of the Matt Bernier Show. Be going over a few different things. First things first, though, however you listen to this thing, thank you for doing so. Please rate, review, and subscribe if you're over on Apple Podcasts or inthemoneypodcast.com or your Android device. However you listen, thank you for doing so. Please make sure that you subscribe and you give us some sort of a rating or however it is on whatever you're listening to. If you're over on YouTube, up in that search bar, all you need to do, type Matt Bernier Show. This episode, along with the 37 prior, will pop up. If you are on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the In the Money channel. Make sure the bell icon is lit up so you get notified anytime new content is uploaded. Or if you are involved and you leave a comment, someone who responds to it, you'll get a notification saying that there was a response to your comment, which is pertinent in regards to last week's show, which we'll dive into that more momentarily. And again, you can follow me on Twitter. You know where to find that at this point. So, for this week's show, we will start off discussing last week as far as the Breeders' Cup feature is concerned. We will transition into this week's Friday feature with Trish Smith. Looking forward to chatting with her, talking about the 9th race from Churchill Downs on Friday afternoon. Nice group of older horses put together, going a mile and an eighth on the main track. And then I'll wrap up this week with, I guess you could just call them observations, and I don't know if anyone's going to really find some serious sort of information in there that they're going to use to perhaps sort of cater to their handicapping and their sort of game plan for the Breeders' Cup coming up next weekend. Not this coming weekend, the following weekend down at Keeneland. I went through the 10 most recent Breeders' Cups, and I went through and took a look at where the horses ran in their most recent start, what kind of price they were, and where they were positioned throughout the run for each of the divisions. So I will again be showing you a spreadsheet. It's not a giant one, doesn't need to be. There's only 10 data points for each of the races. And I think it's just, if nothing else, it's interesting. They're historical data points. I think you can find a little bit of information there, though. I think there is something to certain races, certain divisions, running styles being important in some of them. Some of the races yielding wild results and things of that nature. So again, maybe you won't find anything that's going to just be like sort of, groundbreaking, earth-shattering sort of stuff. But I did the exercise over the weekend, and I think it's valuable enough. And it luckily for me, I feel like it has reinforced some of my opinions going into it, and perhaps it'll make me sort of reconsider some things. So we'll dive into that for the back part of the episode. But first things first, let's talk about the Breeders' Cup feature. That is the idea. For those of you that missed last week's show, my buddy Mike Mutnansky and myself will be doing a video for racingpicks.com coming up this week, and it will be a very early look ahead to the Breeders' Cup, and the idea is a favorite that we like, a favorite that we don't like, and a price that we like in any of the races over the 2 days in the 14 World Championships. I kind of wanted to use that for this show, but with all of you, the listeners and the viewers, because not only have you all been here for a while, but I feel like it's a good way to pull off a Friday feature, Saturday feature, whatever you want to call it, kind of segment for next week's pod, but using all of you. Now, I had initially said 10 to 15. I believe we had over 35 folks say they wanted to be involved. I appreciate all of you getting involved and asking and putting your name in the hat. Unfortunately, we can't use all of them. Simply because the episode would be just a monster. And producer Craig's got a bunch of other stuff on his plate. So we need to try to cater to a couple different things. I went through and took the first 20 folks who went into the comment section and wrote Breeders' Cup feature. They will be the 20 folks who I will be taking video submissions from. Now again, given the time and given the added sort of number of folks who are involved in this, 1 to 2 minutes max. 2 minutes max, hopefully more than a minute. A video, it can be on your computer, it can be on your iPad, your iPhone, your tablet, whatever you use. A favorite you want to back, a favorite you want to fade, and a longer price or a price that you're interested in over the 2 days of the Breeders' Cup. And I recognize no one's going to hold it against you, like I said last week. Nobody's going to hold it against you if something happens between now and then and whatever, your horses don't run or whatever the case may be. There's still a lot of time and pre-entries aren't even out yet. But given the timing of things, we kind of need to do it this way. So this needs to be in this week. I'm going to say the deadline will be, let's plan on Friday at 11 a.m. East Coast time. That would be Friday. What is Friday's date? The 30th? Friday, October 30th, 11 a.m. Eastern. I have already gone through and left comments beneath the first 20 people, but I will actually rattle these names off right now. You need to send me your little video clip with the favorite you like, the favorite you don't like, and the price you like by Friday morning, October the 30th, this Friday at 11 a.m. Because then I need to get those over to producer Craig, and he's got to work his magic, throw it all together, and voila. That will be next Monday's podcast. That will be the podcast for this specific show, the dedicated show, the Matt Bernier show, for the Breeders' Cup. I will also have an episode with PTF and with JK going over the Breeders' Cup as a whole. That'll probably be just sort of a standard joint that we've done in the past. This show, the Matt Bernier show, along with the In the Money Players podcast. So that'll be coming out next week as well. But for this specific show, let's call it the Monday show, it will be all of you and all of your opinions and your thoughts and things like that. And I'm hopeful people really get something out of it, because I think it's a fun idea, and I've liked the Friday feature. I think it's been a great sort of addition to the program, and I hope this continues on with it for the Breeders' Cup. So here are the 20 names. And again, I've left the comment with the email address that you need to email your video clip to. Some of you have already gone down this path before because some of you have been guests on the Friday feature. So this isn't going to be anything wild for you. Some of you have not, and I'm excited to see and hear what you have to say. So here we go. Peter Appleby, Tom Espinoza, William Campion, Steve Mercica, Jeff O'Reilly, Robert Daisley, Nancy Moran, Jerry Richmond, Tommy Seafeld, Brian Shields, Manning Carroll, John Peruso, Travis Walker, Andrew Moorish, Kevin Breen, Jared Schledorn, Matthew Sargent, Mike Anderson, Mike Robinson, Nick Kettinger. There are your 20 names. Again, in that, going back to last week's episode, if you, for whatever reason, don't have the bell icon lit up, I've left the comment beneath each one of those with the email address that you need to email your 1 to 2 minute video clip with the favorite you like, the favorite you don't like, and the price for the Breeders' Cup. It needs to be in by Friday morning, this Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern. I can't take them any later than that because I got to get them over to Craig. So you have a few days now, fair enough time, fair enough warning to get stuff out there. And again, just roll with it. Don't worry about how polished it is or anything like that. I've heard from other folks who it's their first time coming on, or they don't really do this sort of thing. They don't talk about it too much as far as like a camera is concerned. Just roll with it. We're just BSing. We're sitting out back at the picnic tables. We're at the bar. We're at the racetrack. We're just going back and forth, spitballing with horses you like and horses you don't like, and why. But that is the critical piece. I at least need a little bit of reasoning. I'm not asking you for a novel. I just need a little bit of reasoning why you do and don't like certain horses for those 3 pieces. Again, 1 to 2 minutes. Can't go any more than that, and I would prefer to go a little bit longer than 1 minute. So there you have it. Those are the 20 folks who will be involved in next Monday's show. And actually, it might come out earlier than that, but probably not. I'll talk to producer Craig. But the point is, have those things in here Friday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. No later than that. We need to get those going. So looking forward to seeing what everybody puts together. Now, we have an immediate Friday feature coming up. We have Trish Smith to help us out. We're going to talk about Churchill Downs race number 9 on Friday afternoon, 1 1/8 on the main track. Let's go to the Friday feature, and then after that, we'll talk about some sort of historical pieces as far as the past 10 Breeders' Cups are concerned. Friday feature time, and happy to have Trish Smith on board as a guest. She was the winner of the most recent Friday feature that we did. Obviously, last week was a little bit of an oddity given the timing of things. But Trish, thank you for doing this. I understand you're relatively new to the game, and for everybody watching and listening, how about you just kind of give us a little bit of background, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Matt. Greatly appreciate it. And my name is Trish Smith. I'm originally from Illinois. And even as a little girl, I remember Zenyatta was kind of the horse that got me. I was a fan of racing. And just watching Zenyatta perform, I think her Breeders' Cup Classic was the first one that I watched. And she just kind of made me a fan. And from there, I moved down to Lexington, Kentucky, to go to University of Kentucky. And that was my first time actually at the racetrack at Keeneland. So I went to a lot of races. It was more of the social aspect in college. Anybody who's been to Keeneland, tailgating and stuff. But it wasn't until back in March, unfortunately, I lost my job due to COVID. And I really needed a hobby because I've always kind of been a little bit of a busybody. And I just kind of went down a rabbit hole one day. I found your show on YouTube, DRF, and I was just like, okay, I'm just going to try to get into horse camp handicapping. And I watched the Keeneland meet online, but it wasn't until the Oaks this year that I actually decided to kind of start playing like pick sixes, pick fives. I knew what they were, but most of the time when I would bet at Keeneland, it was just a little bit of, just fun money going out to the racetrack with friends. So.
Now, when you would go to Keeneland, for the folks who, obviously the folks that have been there already know about this, but there's an entire tailgating area called the Hill. If you don't go into the track. Now, were you more of a fan of the Hill, or were you someone who would actually go into the track and sort of post up by the rail?
Oh, I love to post up by the rail. I definitely was always, because even though I didn't know that much about the form. I mean, I knew enough like trifectas. I knew a little bit about gambling, but never actually trying to handicap it. But I was definitely always at the track just because I loved watching the horses in the paddock, and still do. I still really like that to be a part of my handicapping as well.
Now, you visited Keeneland. I would imagine, still being in Kentucky, have you made the trek to Churchill Downs at any point thus far?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I went to, I think, 2014 and 2015. Those were my first two derbies. So
awesome.
California Chrome and then American Pharoah. So not too bad.
I was going to say, you saw a couple of good ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was lucky enough to, when it was at Keeneland last, 2015, I saw American Pharoah win the Breeders' Cup Classic too. So that was definitely good timing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've had a pretty good run here. I can say the same, because I feel like if you're bringing up Zenyatta sort of being a horse that you were a fan of and kind of getting involved, that was relatively the similar time frame for me, where I didn't really start going all in until probably about 2009. So when Rachel was doing her thing on the East Coast and Zenyatta was doing her thing on the West Coast, that was obviously the year that she won the Classic out at Santa Anita. So time-wise, I think you and I are more or less on the same page as far as our fandom is concerned, and just kind of checking different things out. Have you found over time, early on anyway, from a handicapping standpoint, that there are certain tracks that you may have a preference for? Is it as simple as because Keeneland is the local track? I mean, I know plenty of people in New York who it's New York and they don't care about anything else that goes on outside of the Breeders' Cup. I mean, are you someone who just, you prefer sort of the local tracks and then whatever else happens, or are you open to kind of looking around?
I'm definitely open to looking around. I will say, especially for someone who doesn't have like the past performances and stuff, I don't have any subscription services. I kind of tend to go where the bigger meets are, just because it's easier to find a YouTube race of the big races. You can easily pull up the week before people talking about the Breeders' Cup, about the Oaks, whereas like day-to-day handicapping for a random track, it's a little bit harder to find if you're not subscribing to a service or anything like that. But definitely so far, I would say Keeneland, just because it's right in my backyard, used to it. A little bit of Churchill Downs following. I watched Kentucky Downs too for the first time, but handicap, I just wanted to watch the first day. I was like, okay, I'm not even gonna try to handicap this.
I tell you what, it's been a few years now that I've really been looking at Kentucky Downs, and it's still as clear as mud. So I can't offer
well, that makes me feel a little bit better.
I can't offer you any advice as far as Kentucky Downs goes. It's fun to watch. I love it, how unique it is and how different it is. It looks a lot like what you see over in Europe with their sort of, odd configurations on grass. But as far as trying to pick a winner, I could not be farther from the right person to be asking as far as opinions of that are concerned. The only thing I know is that the Kentucky Downs form did very well at Keeneland this year, and I can't help but think a lot of it has to do with sort of the stamina that those horses build running over that Kentucky Downs track, where it's just an undulating turf course and the distances are a little bit quirky, and it's just it's one of those things. I think at least file it away for next fall, because obviously at this point, with the Keeneland meeting wrapped up and we won't go back until Friday and Saturday, the Breeders' Cup next week, it's one of those things where, all right, maybe we can't do anything with it right now, but I think that's something that not enough people take advantage of, or really, it's one thing to be looking at it on a day-to-day basis and say, oh, okay, well, speed is doing well here right now and all those sort of things. Factor in that, more often than not, horses coming from certain meets year to year, that kind of holds form. I mean, I know in the past the Kentucky Downs horses have done well at Keeneland in the fall, so I really see no reason why that would change going into next fall's meeting. So those are the sort of things I think obviously folks want to, if you're trying to get a leg up, especially early on in a meeting, I think those are the sort of things that can certainly help your cause. We talk about the Breeders' Cup. It's only just, at this point, a week and a half away, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on when folks are listening. Do you have any real sort of or thoughts about the Breeders' Cup this year? Obviously, it's unfortunate as far as the fan situation is concerned. But do you have, is there a race in particular you're looking forward to most?
I really am excited about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile just because I was a fan of Jackie's Warrior when, before the Champagne and stuff, and it's just kind of cool when you have a horse that, you pick at the beginning and he's continued to do pretty well. So I'm really a fan of Jackie's Warrior. That's probably the one that I'm most excited about. And Tis the Law, I'm a pretty big Tis the Law fan, so I'm hoping that he can kind of rebound for a big race in the Classic as well.
I'm very guilty of that sort of thing where when you see a horse, whether it's a debut or very early on, and I mean, look, I'm guilty of it with a horse like She Dares the Devil, and there have been other ones, but you see them early on, you go, there's something here. I like this horse.
Yeah.
I'm going to just ride or die with this horse. Whatever happens. Yeah. I'm going down with the ship if it doesn't work, or we're going to just go out in a blaze of glory. So I can certainly understand where you're coming from with Jackie's Warrior, and he's been brilliant in basically every one of his starts thus far. We'll find out how the 2 turns works out at Keeneland in just a short time here. And you brought up Tis the Law. PTF and I were talking about it last week in Horse Player Happy Hour. We'll have one more coming up this Friday leading into the Breeders' Cup. But he's the kind of horse that it feels like people have just... It's as if he ran a terrible race in the Derby. And I mean,
I agree.
It doesn't make sense. He ran a game second to a horse who came back 4 weeks later and nearly won the Preakness. He got beat by a really nice horse in Swiss Skydiver. That was authentic, obviously.
I was going to say Swiss Skydiver is my other horse just because I loved her in the Preakness, just the filly going against the girls kind of thing. But yeah, I'm a huge Swiss Skydiver fan as well.
And it'll be fascinating to see ultimately where Kenny McPeak and company choose to go with her if they do go against the boys in the Classic at a distance that they tend to believe is better for her than the 1 1/8, or do you take on a horse like Monomoy Girl in the distaff at a 1 1/8? We'll find out. There's still plenty of time. I know it doesn't seem like there's plenty of time, but there is plenty of time for the connections to decide what they want to do. Trish, let's talk about this race a little bit here. Race number 9 on Friday. For those of you playing along, that is the Friday feature. We have the very early past performances, so we don't have post positions. The only thing I will throw out there is that High Regard and Final Cut, the 2 Vicky Oliver horses, they are a coupled entry. So do with that what you will. But we don't have numbers yet as far as odds are concerned and things like that. So we're going to just kind of talk about this more from an overview standpoint. But I know you had brought up something before we came on and started recording about the morning line odds. Walk me through that a little bit.
Yes. Well, I didn't realize that I was so reliant on them until you sent me the email. And then I realized the first thing I was trying to go, and I didn't even realize that I had this tendency, but I'm like, oh, I look at the morning line odds to see what even odds I like. Because especially I'm not a big time player. So it's really important to find long shots. I'm not just going to hit the all button on a race to kind of figure out what odds I even like to make any money at all. And I kept wanting to look at the odds and then the class, and I realized that seems to be my trend. I would just get on Twin Spires in the morning. I would look at the morning line odds for the horse, and then I would go to the class and then the speed. And that kind of seems to be my trend. And I didn't even realize I had that trend until I was trying to look at this race. And I was like, I have no clue. There's some horses I'm like, would this horse be a price in here? Maybe it would be, but I honestly had no idea.
Well, and that's one of those things with more time and more seasoning as far as sort of doing the deep dive into the handicapping aspect. When if you're someone who gets the PPs day of, it's one thing where you can just kind of roll with it on the fly. For other folks who want to do, crazy deep amount of work into it, that becomes one of those things, to your point, where when you first see those odds, it's a very difficult thing to just completely ignore them and not let that sort of skew your opinion, because then you look at it and say, oh, well, okay, I don't really want to take this horse at 2-1. Let me look at a horse who's 8-1 or 10-1 on the morning line, only to find out then day of that 8 or 10 to 1 on the morning line, everybody and their brother is on the horse, and the horse is now 7 to 2 or
Yeah.
4 to 1. So it's one of those things, and for folks who still are, I don't want to say, we're all a little bit skewed when we see morning lines and things like that, but there's something you can do in the product that Daily Racing Form has called Formulator. You can toggle out, I believe anyway, that's how it used to be when I still worked there, but you can toggle out the morning line odds, either have them showing or not showing. And I think it is a good exercise to at least try to get comfortable with that sort of thing where you're going through sort of assessing the horse just purely on the past performances and the pace and the class and things like that, as opposed to sort of that preconceived notion of, well, okay, well, this horse is going to be the favorite. I don't really want them. Or this horse is going to be 20 to 1, because in reality, the morning line is only as good as the person making the morning line is, frankly, and some are better than others. And I think that's what can occasionally steer us in unfavorable directions, right or wrong, for better or for worse, as opposed to when you look at things just sort of bare bones and say, you know what, I want to be the one to make the decision on what I think of these certain horses and then try to price it out accordingly. You kind of alluded to the things that you look at. You use pace, you use speed figures over on an ADW like Twin Spires. I know other ADWs have their sort of information as well. From a pace standpoint, how do you typically go about it? Do you just look at it and say as simple as whoever has sort of the fastest early numbers is who I'm going to kind of lean toward, or do you look at anything deeper than that?
Well, for the pace, usually actually, I like to listen to shows so I know ahead of time, like DRF, if somebody says a horse is a pace, so I go into that kind of having that preconceived notion so I know what I'm looking for. Because like I said, I just started handicapping. Oaks was my first. So I'm just trying to kind of figure out what type of handicapper I am, I guess, if that makes sense, trying to track my own performance to see, okay, these are things that I'm pretty good at, trying to figure out if I'm better at turf, better at the dirt, trying to keep track of all my own stats. And so far for pace, I actually found it more beneficial to look at the race replays as well. So that's kind of been my biggest thing, race replays, and knowing what I'm going to be looking for based on what other people have said about the horse, and then just trying to watch the race replay the morning of.
I think what you kind of just laid out is something that's really important for anyone who, whether you're brand new babe in the woods or you are someone who is still on the beginner side of things, you got to kind of figure out what your sweet spot is. Are you someone who is really, really, astute at identifying, there's 3 or 4 horses who in their past races all like to go to the front, but this one of the 4 is actually the fastest of them all, and they're going to make the front. That's not an easy thing to do. Some people are better at it than others, and conversely, some people are better at looking at races, and I'll just use turf as the example because this is typically what you see in turf races. Some people are better at identifying, okay, you know what, there's a number of horses who like to come from the back, but who's really the one that's got the kick that can run down someone who has a little bit better positional speed? So I think you bring up a really good point. You need to sort of, don't just immediately dive into different things. Sort of, you got to have that feeling out process. You got to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses lie. We all have them. I sound like a broken record. If I never needed to play a turf sprint ever again, I wouldn't. It's just not something I'm very good at, whereas I know many people, that's one of the that's their forte. So everybody's got their own different piece. With the pace of a race like this, race 9 at Churchill Downs on Friday, what was your initial thought going through?
My initial thought, I'm trying to think, I think there was it Final Cut or High Regard? I need to...
So High Regard is a horse who, she's kind of one that wants to come from a little bit farther off of it. Final Cut is the horse who has that proper sort of early speed. And I would imagine if they both go, I'd imagine that horse is forward.
Okay, yeah. Because when I was looking, I was trying to solve it into that too. And I was like, okay, without the video, I'm like, I was a little bit lost for that. I mean, the base thing, Multiplier, I kept coming back to. And once again, because I could find, I remember watching him, the Stephen Foster, I was familiar with him. And I mean, he ran 4th, so I mean, not bad. I mean, Tom's d'Etat, considering the field and everything. So that was kind of the horse that I kept coming back to. But as far as pace, I think Final Cut from what I've seen so far.
I agree. I think Final Cut is going to be forwardly placed in this spot. Also, it's fascinating to me that the Oliver entry, it's 2 fillies taking on the boys, specifically older boys for the most part in this race. The other horse that I would throw in there as far as one that's likely to be forward is a horse like Celtic Striker for Ray Handel coming in from New York.
Okay.
Now, Celtic Striker's an interesting sort of case study because especially for newer players, you take a look at a horse like this, you see he's 3 for 9 lifetime. Yes, he's a 3-year-old. He's taken on some older horses, but as good as he is, and I'm intrigued by him in this race, but his 3 victories have all come when he's been able to get out there all by himself and control things. And there are certain horses who that is the only way they'll succeed is when they have everything just kind of gift wrapped for them, as opposed to some other horses who have shown the ability to sit off of a target or rally from off of it, or basically just be able to overcome some sort of adversity. I'm not convinced that we're there yet with this horse, Celtic Striker, and that's what concerns me enough about him. And I don't know what kind of price he's going to be, frankly. Some of his speed figures pale in comparison to some of the other older horses in here, but he's interesting because of his speed, but he's also, to me, vulnerable because he's never shown any sort of versatility. And I would just strongly encourage folks, especially newer players, don't automatically think, oh, this horse is going to go to the front, they're going to be fine. It doesn't always work out that way, unfortunately. Now, you brought up Multiplier. Multiplier is the kind of horse, to me, I was familiar with him going way, way back when, he was on the sort of the Triple Crown Trail. He ran in the Preakness. He ran in the Belmont. When they moved him over to the turf, I thought it was an interesting move, kind of peculiar, because I thought he had actually run some good races on dirt leading into that. He had sort of the middle portion of his career campaigned on turf, especially when he was on the East Coast with Bill Mott's barn. Then Peter Miller gets a hold of him again. They go right back to the dirt. And that most recent start in the Charlestown Classic, for those who may not know, Charlestown is a very peculiar sort of configuration because it's a bull ring. It is not a full-size oval like you would see at Saratoga or you would see at Churchill Downs or Keeneland or anywhere else. They go 3 turns in that race at 1 1/8 as opposed to 2. So I don't want to hold that race against him. And to your point, prior to that, you've got a pretty solid effort. Defeated 8 lengths, but he finished 4th behind Tom's D'Etat and By My Standards, who are going to be 2 of the top 6 choices in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So I can totally understand why you like Multiplier.
Yeah, kind of the running well against others, I guess, because Stunning Sky, that's kind of how I landed on you when you made that comment. And then from there, I went back, I looked at her video, and I'm like, yeah, she's been running well against, kind of the competition that she's been facing. And also Tyler Glaff-Leone, he's been pretty good to me for Keeneland as far as making money. So far, I don't really want to get off a jockey. I'm not strictly just looking at the jockey, but it definitely helps when they've kind of been kind to you in the past.
It's also nice, too, when you see riders take that step forward where they've always shown promise, but then all of a sudden, it just kind of organically happens. And I feel like this year, not that Tyler was ever struggling, but he always had the potential. And I feel like this year, he really took that step forward where he is now in that sort of top echelon of rider, not just in Kentucky, but in the United States. That includes the folks in New York and the folks in Southern California. If I'm looking for another horse in here who, well, you know what? I'm not even going to say another horse. Another race that to me is polarizing, that I have a very difficult time making heads or tails of. You have a couple horses coming out of a non-winners of 3 other than, and now that's the condition of this race on Friday as well. You have a few horses coming out of a non-winners of 3 other than at Keeneland on October 4th. Now, from a speed figure standpoint, specifically Timeform US, those are speed figures that I know and trust. Craig Milkowski is the head figure maker over there. They awarded that race an incredibly fast speed figure. And not only are we talking about these horses, but Knicks Go, the winner that day, who went off and won by 100, and he basically broke every record that there was. He broke the track record, he did X, Y, and Z. He is now likely to be one of the favorites for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. So this is going to be, in my opinion anyway, a very important race for the folks who are interested in Knicks Go for the Breeders' Cup. Because if those horses come out of, if they run well here, that bodes well, I think, for a horse like Knicks Go if you're trying to project him as a likely sort of win candidate for the Dirt Mile. If they come out of that race on Friday here and they bomb, then maybe you want to look at that race at a second or third time through. And that's what makes me have a really difficult time here as far as Casino Star is concerned in Royal Mesa. They were no match for Knicks Go, but on paper, there are no Knicks Goes in this race. There are no horses capable of running a race like that. The question is the race really that legitimate from the numbers standpoint? I'm not willing to say yes or no just yet. I just don't know that I'd be betting on either of those horses at the prices they're likely to be. One other horse that we can talk about and just bring up is Silver Prospector for Steve Asmussen, because this is a horse that folks who were paying attention to the Triple Crown earlier this year, sort of in the midst and pre-pandemic, he was a name down in Arkansas in that trail through the Arkansas Derby. He actually won the Southwest Stakes, did so pretty impressively. Then he came back and ran poorly in the Rebel and the Arkansas Derby. They've given him some time here. He shows up here off of a bit of a layoff. 3-year-olds this time of year, I firmly believe that they can take a step forward here. You get that physical maturation. You know, think of the college athlete. You know, you show up as a freshman. That's what we're dealing with there early on in the 3-year-old campaign. Now they've had some time. Now they're juniors in college. Now they're a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. They can go out there and do some different things. I'm just concerned about the running style. What are we going to get first time off the bench against older horses? But Silver Prospector has every right to run well in a spot like this. I just fear he's going to be a bit of a short price. Did you have any feel on a horse like Silver Prospector?
He was one of the ones I was bringing up for Exacta. I was thinking, I kind of just kept coming up like Silver Prospector and Multiplier for an Exacta. Maybe Royal Mesa and a trifecta, because I thought the Royal Mesa would be a price, but if I'm totally off on that. Because I really couldn't, when I was trying to figure out what horse would be the favorite, I really couldn't find anything that I knew for certain. So
and that's always, again, even when you feel like you've got a good idea of, oh well, this horse is going to be around this price, that sort of thing. You know, we're only going off of what the paper says, and I'm saying this not in a nefarious way, but if the connections, especially if they're ownership group, they like to bet, and they think the horse is coming into it doing well, and they drop a bunch of money on the horse to win, well, all of a sudden, what I had thought would be a 5-1 price is going to be 7-2, and that kind of throws a monkey wrench into everything. So everyone's price, there's sort of a ripple effect there. So I agree with you. It's a difficult race to figure out who's going to get bet in what positions. I understand, though, the logic and the case for Multiplier, and ultimately, he's going to be where you go in this spot.
Yes. Yeah, he is where I landed on.
Multiplier for Trish Smith in the 9th at Churchill Downs on Friday afternoon, 1 1/8 on the main track. Non-winners of 3 other than. If you want to be in Trish's position, not next week, but the following week, after the Breeders' Cup, for that week's Friday feature, you got to leave your selection beneath the video player on YouTube. I won't take it anywhere else, not on Twitter, not on email. It's got to be beneath the video player on YouTube. Trish Smith, thank you so much for doing this. I hope you had a good time. I thought this was great. I hope everybody can kind of gain something, especially the folks who may be a little bit on the newer side of things. Are you on social media at all?
Yes, I actually just started a Twitter today. It's at Oakley Jeter. So, and I might do some Breeders' Cup picks. So
perfect. Awesome. Everybody go on over there. Give Trish a follow. Trish Smith, thank you so much. Good luck this week, and good luck in the Breeders' Cup. We'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, thank you to Trish Smith for the help with this week's Friday feature. Again, if you want to be in Trish's position next time we do the Friday feature, which will not be next week, it'll be the following week, the Monday after the Breeders' Cup, you need to leave your selection for Churchill's 9th beneath the video player on YouTube. If you are the winner, I will contact you, and we will schedule a time for you to hop on the show and chop up some racing. Until then, and to wrap things up here for this episode, I don't know if this is going to be something that people find worthwhile or not. I thought it was interesting, and I think there is something here, maybe not for all the divisions, but enough that maybe you want to factor into your handicapping and your planning when looking at the Breeders' Cup next weekend. I've gone through and I just put together the winners, the most recent track they ran at, their off odds, and where they were positioned, very similar to the track profile situation, for the last 10 Breeders' Cups. Now, the juvenile turf sprint, I have that one here. I don't put much credence into that, simply because when this one was off the turf, I stopped looking for these other ones. They're 2-year-olds sprinting on turf. I think it's just a bit of a random race. It's not one that, frankly, I'm going to have a ton of cash involved in. I don't believe, anyway. So I just wanted to focus more on the other races that I think are there's perhaps more signal there. And I recognize some of them are 2-year-old races, but, unique circumstances or instances present unique opportunities. So here we go. Going to start off with the juvenile fillies turf. The 4 juvenile races are lined up. Obviously, based on the way things have gone with Future Stars Friday. Okay, so we'll see all 4 of these races run at Keeneland on Friday afternoon, and then the remainder of them will be run on Saturday. You can see these are the 10 most recent winners of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. And this is I'll tell you what, some of these races, when I went through them, some of them seem a little lackluster as far as going back in the record books. Others hold up quite well. I think this is one of them. I think this is a race that has done very, very well for itself. You take a look at all of the last, realistically, let's say last 6 years, going back to Lady Eli, but you can go even farther back than that with a horse like Stephanie's Kitten, who her name will pop up again. Talking about the Filly and Mare Turf, I mean, this has been a very productive race, very strong race. You have had many, many talented, quality fillies go on and do bigger and better things in time. So don't sleep on this race being a sort of harbinger of things to come. I found it interesting, though. I don't know that I would say there's any massive, data to pull from this other than here at the second call. Now, again, keep in mind, these races, I believe, are at a mile on the grass. So first call for the route races is at a half mile. Second call is at 3/4. It seems pretty evident to me that you need to be in good position basically turning for home, because it's effectively where the 3/4 mark in these races is going to be. I think it's an interesting piece to consider, to keep in the back of your mind. When you think of some of these other horses, the name that jumps out to me this year anyway is a horse like Aunt Pearl. I mean, she has a running style very similar to this filly right here, newspaper of record. She's yet to show that she can sit off of a target, but Brad Cox doesn't seem to think that that's going to be any sort of an issue. You've got a very similar run here with Catch a Glimpse. This race happened to be at Keeneland when she won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. So maybe you want to factor in something like this, that you basically need to be within a length and a half or so at the top of the lane to have any real chance based on the 10 most recent runs. And again, this doesn't account for troubled trips and things like that. But I think it is at least something to consider. Something else that I found interesting is taking a look and seeing where these horses came from in their most recent runs. You see effectively the same names pop up over and over again. Woodbine shows up twice on here. Belmont Park 3 times. Keeneland twice. And then if you want to just sort of lump the Euros together, let's say Longchamp and Newmarket, and then Sharing happened to be the anomaly based on that sort of thing. So you'll see, I think there's some intriguing that maybe I didn't necessarily anticipate, but I think much of it sort of jives with some of these divisions and where some of these horses come from. So there you have it. And the beautiful thing, especially if you're over on YouTube, I think this is going to be one of those where if you've listened to most of it on your Apple Podcasts or whatever, maybe you want to transition over to YouTube because you can just pause it on the chart and you can take a look and do with it what you will. So that's what I've got for the Juvenile Fillies Turf. The Juvenile Turf for the boys, I found the running style piece to be very interesting, sort of comparing it to the girls. For the last 10 years, you take a look at the odds piece in this race specifically, I think is interesting. I think there is something here where you're looking for that sort of sweet spot between 3.5 and 10-1, more or less. You don't have any wild results, but you don't have necessarily the chalk of the chalk winning. Compare the first and second call average for the boys, 5.3 lengths and 4.1 lengths, compared to the girls, 3 lengths and 1.7 lengths. It's a pretty dramatic difference. And I find it interesting, and I'll show you in a moment, that more or less meshes with the boys and girls on dirt as well. The girls tend to be much more forwardly placed, at least on sort of the whole, on the collective, than the boys do, as far as the winners are concerned. Now, again, you can nitpick certain pieces in this. You can say, oh, well, that's entirely up to you. However you want to approach it, that's your prerogative. I'm just showing you what I pulled from the last 10. I find it fascinating that with the boys, you have 4 instances where their most recent run came at Newmarket. You have a Deauville, a Dundalk, and a Chantilly. So, 7 of the 10 runnings going back to 2010, the horses have come from overseas. I'm not going to, I get it, Woodbine is technically not the United States. It's from Canada. But, 7 of the 10 coming from Europe, I think is worth noting. Structure and Oscar Performance coming from Belmont Park. You know, Belmont's a name you're going to see pop up here quite frequently, which I shouldn't be as surprised as I was. But it struck me how frequently Belmont Park showed up. But now compare this to the girls. In the girls, you only had 2 European winners. Now, also, to be fair, this has been a race that has been absolutely dominated by, who else? Chad Brown. Lady Eli, New Money Honey, Rushing Fall, Newspaper of Record. He's got 4 of the 10. It'll be just interesting to see, and again, comparing the positions where the girls are compared to the boys, in that it seems like the boys from Europe tend to have a little bit of an advantage. I don't know why. I don't know if there's any rationale to that, and given their sort of running styles, I just found it interesting to sort of compare and contrast those two. Moving to the dirt, and as I said, you see sort of parallels with the girls on dirt or turf, and you see parallels with the boys on dirt or turf. The girls on dirt, this is one where I think there is some real signal here. I think you need to be looking at it saying the British idioms and the Caledonia roads of the world are maybe less, I think they're more exceptions to the rule than the rule. I think the rule is much more in line with the jaywalks, the champagne rooms, the songbirds, the Take Charge Brandy. I used, for this piece here, excuse me, I used She's a Tiger's numbers, not Rhea Antonia's. Rhea Antonia was put up via disqualification. She's a Tiger crossed the wire first, so I used her information here. Beholder, My Miss Aurelia, Awesome Feather, they were all very close to the front. When you go through and total it all, at first call, again, so in a 1:16 race, half mile into it, on average, they're a length off of it. And 3/4 into the race, they're on average 0.1 lengths, a nose off the lead. That to me, there's something there. I think I think you have enough of a sample size on a number of different racing surfaces. Tracks that I don't think many people would say are apples to apples. You've got Del Mar in here. You've got Santa Anita. You've got Churchill. You've got Keeneland. You have very, very dramatically different surfaces. It's not like we're talking about, and I get it. You're talking about the 2 Kentucky tracks and the 2 Southern California tracks. My point is, they're all producing very similar pieces. Oddly enough, the 2 that came from well off of it, Caledonia Road was at Del Mar and British Idiom was at Santa Anita. Jaywalk was at Churchill. Champagne Room was out at Santa Anita. Songbird was at Keeneland. Take Charge Brandy was at Santa Anita. I mean, you've got a little bit of everything mixed in here. The constant is you have horses who are very close to the front end. And that includes prices. I mean, if you go back to 2014, you have 3 instances of 17-1 or greater winning this race. And on average, more than 13.5-1 for the past 10 years. Compare it to the boys. Really keep note of these 2 numbers right here, where the girls are in relation to their points of call and the boys. Now, the boys, obviously, they tighten things up, turn them for home, but it's showing here, and maybe this one from New Year's Day, the 8.1 and the 6.1 is skewing it slightly. So even if I wanted to omit these 2, let me pull these out of the data set. Wow, is there an 11 in here too? What did I miss? Oh, there is. Texas Red. Now, Texas Red, to be fair, that race was a complete pace meltdown. And I don't want to pull both of those out because we've seen 2-year-old races really come apart. But the point is, to me, I think there is much more of an onus on being very close to the front with the girls than with the boys in both races. That's just my opinion, my observations. Let me know what you think. We need the video player on YouTube for any of those because I'm curious. I want to know if any of you are seeing things or something is sort of coming to your eye that I'm just not picking up on where, maybe others do. Again, this whole thing is just to try to help each other out here as we get closer to the World Championships. Now we pivot to to Saturday. And the first race that came to my mind that I was interested in seeing what did the numbers look like for the past 10 years was the Filly and Mare Sprint. Because maybe it was a preconceived notion or thought that there was chaos in that race. The data would tend to back it up. particularly in recent memory. I mean, going back to Wayville Avenue, you've got Covfefe at 7 or 8 to 5 last year, but outside of that, your shortest price was 8.5 to 1. That was Finest City at Del Mar. Excuse me, at Santa Anita. So you've had a number of instances where horses at big prices fire. You have a number of instances where horses win from well off of it or up there on the lead. So I feel like this is a pretty fair race depending on how the pace plays out. This has been a fascinating piece. And Jim Goodman, who is the director, I believe, director of mutuals down at Keeneland, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, one of the best in the business. He had tweeted something when I said after the Raven Run, when Venetian Harbor won, I had said, at first blush, I can't imagine this race really having an effect or being a race that is going to have implications for the Breeders' Cup. And Jim said, we've had a pretty good track record in the Filly and Mare Sprint. And take a look at this. I mean, he's not lying. You've got 6 instances where the winner's most recent run was at Keeneland. I recognize 2 of those were Groupie Doll. But you've got prices. All of the horses who came from Keeneland were giant numbers, with the exception of Dubai Majesty, and she was still, 8.5 to 1. Musical Romance was 20 to 1. Bar of Gold was 66.5 to 1. Shamrock Rose was 26 to 1. So there may be something there. You got a couple of winners in their most recent run was at Del Mar. You got a Belmont and a Churchill sort of sprinkled in there. But this is a race to me, if whatever the pace situation is, fast, slow, whatever, if you think your horse is going to get a fair shake of it, this to me is one of the more A, wide open races, but also B, fair races, given where these horses have been positioned and where they come from. My gut says that the pace in these Filly and Mare sprints ends up being very, very swift. And maybe the 7/8 plays into the whole thing. But I think this is a race where if you like, I'm just going to throw a name out there. If you like Gamine and you think she's going to be able to be up on or near the lead, maybe it is fast, but you think she's going to be able to sort of put away a Serengeti Empress and put away anybody else that's up there, she should have a chance. And if you're like me, looking for this thing to come apart, and you like a horse rallying from well off of it, then you know what? If the horse is good enough, you should have a chance. I think this is one of the more fun, random races of the weekend. Just year in and year out. The turf sprint, I've talked about it ad nauseum. I don't have any real feel for these. JK was the one that tipped me off to the idea of just take the speed. And I think on a day-to-day basis, that's the smart way to do it. The Breeders' Cup may be a little bit of an anomaly, simply because you've got the best of the best. This is also going to be a little bit of an anomaly too, this data, because you have races at Santa Anita going 6.5 down the hill, which I don't think, if you talk about apples to oranges, we're talking apples to watermelons. They're just not the same, in my opinion, going down the hill 6.5 to a 5 or 5.5 furlong turf sprint. So to me, this data set is not really, I'm not pulling a ton out of it. I highlighted Mongolian Saturday in orange because, and you'll see this a couple of the times show up in these next tabs, his final prep was at Keeneland, and he won at Keeneland, the Breeders' Cup. So, and I think there was something there. I wanted to see how many horses who prepped at Keeneland came back and won at Keeneland. I believe the total was 3. Maybe something to factor into your final handicapping as you go through and we get closer and closer to next weekend. But all in all, speed does very well in these races, but you have had horses who have rallied from well off of it. Again, I don't think this is a great set of data, though, simply because the 6.5 down the hill is a little bit of a wonky piece for me. So I'm not pulling a ton from this data set because I'm not convinced that there's a ton of signal here. The Dirt Mile I thought was an interesting run through because you have had just as many horses on or near the lead as you have horses rallying from well off of it, but it needs to be stated that these two, in 2010 and 2011, the horses who rallied from well off of it, they were in one-turn races at Churchill Downs. If I filtered those horses out, the 9.5 and the 12 and 12.3, all of a sudden, it changes pretty dramatically where you need to be positioned on the track at a mile, going 2 turns. I get it. There was another Churchill mixed in here. But the point is, these are races where horses are up there forwardly placed on the lead. And this one here, 2015, in reality, that kind of is... The 3.1 lengths that Liam's map was off was simply because of trip. It wasn't because he didn't want to be there. He could have very easily been out there on the chooch at that point. And this number, this minus half length, meaning a half length in front at the second call, which would be 3/4 of a mile, that could have been even shorter. It could have been even more than that. Minus 0.7, minus 0.8. So I think, to me, the moral is 2 turns, you're better being close than you are coming from off of it. And it brings up a horse like I chatted with Trish Smith about in the Friday feature, Nick's Go. He's a fascinating case because that number is off the charts fast. And if he can get out there to a comfortable lead, it's going to be really difficult to run him down. That was also his first race off of what, a year layoff? Does he bounce out of that? There's so many things to dissect from that, but what you do know is he has a running style that is conducive to performing well in a race like this. As I take the filter out of here. So, that's what I'm looking at for the dirt mile. Filly and Mare Turf. In the grand scheme of things, I would say a pretty fair race. You have some favorites mixed in with some prices. You have many different running styles sort of sprinkled in there. The one thing I would say, you don't have a ton of horses that are pushing the pace or on the lead with the exception of Day at the Spa, keeping in mind that race starts going down the hill at Santa Anita the year that she won. If I'm looking for any sort of signal to where these horses come from, you've got a couple of Belmont final prep runners, but for the most part, I think it's a pretty fair run. It has been dominated by Europeans over the past handful of years, going back to Queen's Trust. And I'm including Sister Charlie in that, recognizing that Chad had her. But at one point, she started her career over in Europe. So with the exception of Chad, and that's really kind of the key to this thing. Let's go back to Perfect Shirl. Who was Perfect? Was Perfect Shirl Roger Atfield? So, back to 2011. Zagora, 2012, Chad. Dank, European. Day at the Spa, Chad. Stephanie's Kitten, Chad. Queen's Trust, European. Wuhita, European. Sister Charlie, Chad. Iridessa, European. You're seeing a little bit of a trend there. No surprise. It's not a shocker. If it's not Chad for our American contingent, it's probably a European horse. But as far as running styles and things and prices, I think it's a pretty fair race. I think you find who you think is best, you should have a chance. The sprint, I think there is major signal here based on running style. Again, you'll note the colored shaded bar with Run Happy. He won the Phoenix prior to winning the Breeders' Cup Sprint at Keeneland. But again, the running style. And this jives very well with the track profile I did of Keeneland a few weeks ago. You can find that episode up there. I don't remember if it was 35 or 36, one of the two. But 6 furlong races on the main track. No surprise. I've had people ask, why do you pick so much speed? Speed is king. It's a lot easier to go out there and set the pace than it is to run somebody down. It just is. And you don't have to have the lead, but you better be damn close to it. Or, if you're not, it needs to be an outrageous pace situation. And even then, you're still behind the 8 ball if you're trying to rally from off of it. You need to have exceptional talent like a Matoli, like an Amazombi. Amazombi was a really good racehorse. I feel like people forget about him. But you take a look at some of the other running styles here. Trinneberg, he's up there on the chooch. Work All Week, Run Happy, Dreyfong, Roy H., Big Drama. These are all horses who are going to be forward. So factor that into your handicapping. And again, I think it's even more telling when it jives with the track profile. This set right here, very much in line with 6 furlongs on the main track at Keeneland. The mile. This, to me, was like a mixed bag. Because you've got some all-timers. You've got the Wise Dans, the Goldakovas popping up on this list, the Teppins. And then you've got Expert Eye, who's nice. Tourist, nice horse. Caraconti is a good horse, but, I don't think people are going to think of him as a superstar. Court Vision was $1,000,000 to 1. So I think this is one that can be a little bit all over the place. There is, to me, and again, it's slightly skewed because two of them happen to be the same horse. You see a lot of Keeneland show up there. Uni, Keeneland. Tourist, Keeneland. Tepin, Keeneland. Wise Dan, Keeneland. Wise Dan, Keeneland. Got a couple of Woodbines mixed in there. And I can't help but think and again, the shaded piece here, Tepin, she won in her final prep leading into the Breeders' Cup. They were both at Keeneland. I can't help but think you've got Longchamp on there twice as well. That's where by the way, all of the 10 most recent Breeders' Cup mile winners have had their final prep at Keeneland, Longchamp, or Woodbine. Does that mean anything? I have no idea. But is it a fun fact? I think it is. I think it's something to keep in mind. Also keep in mind, too, off the top of my head, and I recognize some people probably would have preferred this, and I thought about it. I got halfway through it and said, I'm just going to keep going this way. I'm trying to remember how many of these were victories. I believe in their final preps. Uni's was a win. Expert Eye, I do not remember. World Approval was. Tourist was not, I don't believe. Tepin was. I have no idea about Caraconti. Wise Dan, one of them was a loss. The loss was washed off onto the synth. So I don't really hold that against him. Court Vision, I could not tell you. And Golden Cove, I would say probably was a win. But just, again, interesting tidbits here. You've got a mixed bag of running styles. Prices, you got a couple of bombers in there, but, do with that what you will. I think that's an interesting group. The distaff. Running style-wise, you can rally from off of it a little bit. I found that to be the most intriguing piece. That this was not a race, it felt like anyway, that was dominated by horses who were up there on the front end, as opposed to what we saw, or we were looking at anyway, with like the 2-year-old girls on dirt, where those races are really, really, it's top-heavy with speed. At least for the past 10 years. Doesn't mean any... By the way, everything I'm saying right now could go completely out the window this year. But I think you've got trends. You've got things. And if you say that this is all garbage, that's fine. I think it's just maybe some things to consider. Price-wise, you have not had a double-digit winner of the distaff in 10 years. And I shouldn't even say in 10 years. The past 10 years. I don't know when the last double-digit winner of the distaff was. Running style, you've got horses who have some, I would call it tactical positional speed. You don't have burners in there per se, but you also don't have true one-run closers. The closest to that was Blue Prize, and that was a race last year in the distaff that featured a pretty swift pace with Ollie's Candy. So, interesting group here. You've got some big names. Some big names. Royal Delta, Beholder, Untappable, Beholder again. This might be the most fat, I'd forgot when I was going through. It was like, damn, she won the distaff in 13, and then 3 years later won it again in 16. That's something. And in 15, she would have been the second choice in the Classic had she not got, I think she was either sick or she was bleeding. So, fascinating group. Oh, and I didn't even include Monomoy Girl in there, she's trying for her second one coming up here in a few weeks, or at this point, a few days. The Turf. This is a race that I think there is something that is abundantly clear. You'll note that I don't have lengths in this piece here for Found, because this was the year that Shining Copper went out and opened up by 25, and it would have just skewed everything. So I did not even bother including it. The common theme here, to me, it's abundantly clear. Unless you have a champion in bricks and mortar, a wild card in Little Mike, and I guess if you wanted to call Main Sequence an American horse, although he started over in Europe, the Europeans dominate. Enable, Talismanic, Highland Reel, Found, Magician, St. Nicholas Abbey, Dangerous Midge. I mean, you're dealing with proper Euros. And when they don't win, it's to a freak effort from a better than gets credit for horse in Little Mike, or a champion in bricks and mortar. I will be flummoxed if a European horse doesn't win this year, based on what our American horses look like so far as the turf is concerned. Price-wise, you can get a little bit of everything in there. Running style-wise, you get a little bit of everything in there. The turf is always one of my favorite races, even if it's not one that I'm betting on. I love long-distance turf racing. It's my favorite to watch. I think it's much more tactical and strategic than what we see with just sort of the breakneck speed. And we get to the final race, the classic, the big one. If I had told you that, 7 of the last 10 winners of the Breeders' Cup Classic, their final start came in New York, what would you have said? And then if I even threw out the caveat that of the 7, 3 of them came at Saratoga. Never mind Belmont. I think everybody assumes, Jockey Club Gold Cup, something like that. No. 3 of them came at Saratoga. 2 of them were the Travers with Arrogate and American Pharoah. What is this sort of plot telling me and showing me? Well, remember Blame's race when he had that duel with Zenyatta? The pace was unreal. I mean, anybody that was close, and they basically had separated into 2 packs. Anybody that was close to the front early on finished up the track. Drosselmeyer's race, if we're just being honest, was not a very good race. Fort Larned, he wins on the lead at Santa Anita in a great run with Mucho Macho Man. Mucho Macho Man gets his revenge next year in pace-pressing fashion. We all know what happened in the Bayern Classic, but he wins in gate-to-wire fashion. Pharaoh goes to Keeneland and wins in gate-to-wire fashion. Arrogate wins in, I'll call it stalking position, because he was just off the pace, and then for a moment it looked like he was going to get the slip and lose, or get the slip on him, and then he just unleashed that wild stretch run of his. Gunrunner, gate-to-wire fashion. Accelerate in one of the weaker classics that we've seen in recent memory, in sort of I guess you could call that a stalking position. And then Vino Rosso in, again, sort of a classic last year. He wins from a little bit farther off of it. To me, it still is going to behoove you to be more forward than rallying from off of it, especially given the way the 2 turns at Keeneland played this year and over the past 5 years based on the data that we threw up there a couple weeks back. What does that mean for certain horses? Does it mean you can't win from 100 out of it? No, obviously not. I mean, we've seen other horses do that. But I just maintain you want to be probably closer than farther if you're looking for the winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. So there you have it. I hope someone can get something out of this. I thought it was an interesting walk down memory lane. I think there is some stuff to take out of it. I don't know that I'm going to be bankrolling specifically on something that I saw out of this stuff, but I think if nothing else, it's a good supplement to your profile work, and then couple that with the real proper important stuff, the nuts and bolts, the form, the replays, and the connections and things like that. So hopefully this is something that everybody got something out of. I really appreciate it. For those of you, actually, I can probably just turn this camera around, can't I? Hi there. How are you? Back here. Oh, slate's gone. Who cares? We're buttoning things up. Thank you for listening. However you listen to this thing, you've got Apple Podcasts, you've got inthemoneypodcast.com, you've got your Android device, you've got a million different ways. You've got YouTube. Over on YouTube, search Matt Bernier Show. You'll get this episode along with the 37 prior. I want to thank Trish Smith again for being the guest for this week's Friday feature. Again, race number 9 at Churchill on Friday. If you want to be in her position, not next Monday, the following Monday. And I say Monday, it might be Tuesday. I might need to amend that because I don't know what time I get home on Sunday from Lexington. So we'll figure that out in time. You need to leave your selection beneath the video player on YouTube. However you listen, please rate, review, subscribe, bell icon lit up, thumbs down, leave comments, chop it up beneath the video player with other people, myself. Follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. I don't know if those of you, the 20 at the top who are in the Breeders' Cup feature, need your 1 to 2 minute video clip of the favorite you like, the favorite you don't like, and a price by Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. The email address is beneath the comment that I left over on last week's episode. And I think from a housekeeping standpoint, that's pretty much it. That episode will either be up next Monday or perhaps even earlier, given producer Craig's workload. So we'll figure that out in time. But those things need to be in. Friday, we have a Horse Players Happy Hour. It's basically your last-ditch effort to try to get into the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. Join PTF and I and anybody else that's a guest that I don't know of just yet. And then over on racingpicks.com, obviously the content continues for myself. I write throughout the week, do some videos, but also I've got a special video coming out with my buddy Mike Mutnansky from Sports Radio WEI in Boston, talking about the Breeders' Cup, going over what all of you are going over for the the Breeders' Cup feature. Talking about favorites we like, favorites we don't like, and maybe some prices in some of the Breeders' Cup World Championship races. This will probably be the last time I chat in podcast form with this audience, specifically the Matt Bernier Show's audience, before the Breeders' Cup. I'll have to record an intro and sort of a sign-off for the Breeders' Cup feature episode, but there's not going to be any kind of chat from me. But you'll be able to find my content all over the joint, whether it's part of the In the Money Network, other podcasts out there, and obviously NBC. Will be on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of Breeders' Cup week. I will be reminding you that in next week's episode. We have Betting the Breeders' Cup on Thursday with the whole crew, me, Edzo, Brittany, Lafitte, Nick, anybody else that shows up. I don't even know at this point. And then Friday and Saturday, we've got the World Championships from King of Racecourse in Lexington, Kentucky. Until next time, this has been episode 38 of the Matt Bernier Show. Good luck however you play, whatever you play.